Welcome to the Trumpet of the Last Few Days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
Across our geopolitical spectrum, we find that we ever draw closer to conflict in the world stage. How can we face such dramatic turmoil with an incompetent commander-in-chief determined to take and shed blood in the streets?
Well,
as we go forward,
I can see a couple of
let
methods.
us turn now and look at the
Method number 1 of avoiding conflict on the world stage. Initiate the Greek chorus that explains everything that's going in the background to everyone observing. Therefore, there's no hidden agenda. Method 2. Exit
Greeks
stage left. Do what?
The Greeks have their own agenda, though. You can't trust them.
Method number 2. Exit stage left.
In reality, we could avoid a lot of this if we just, it didn't do the world stage as often.
Well, the problem is we're being run by a bunch of globalists.
Yeah, but what happens when you get embroiled in everyone else's business?
Well,
one war after another.
An interesting thing about that is globalism has been proven time and time again to just not work. It doesn't function. We were literally cursed by God for globalism to never work. It's just the way it is.
Well,
on the other hand, tribalism, although functional, has significant flaws. So we need to find a balance kind of between the two. That balance was, for a while, your nations, your countries.
Which ironically were formed by tribes.
Now, if you look at the Karl Marx's position, Karl Marx was a globalist. And he honestly thought that the world would take in revolt and set up a worldwide communist nation. They realized in the 1920s that wasn't working.
Actually, not all of them did realize that. That's why you had you didn't have the fascists rise up till the 30s.
Yes, but the fascist parties were already formed by the 30s. They figured it out in the 20s, and then they formed, and then they were fully formed by the 30s, in which they gained, and then that's when they started gaining power.
Mussolini
in which they were in full power by the 40s.
Mussolini was an international socialist until the National German Socialist Workers' Party.
Which started in the 30s.
Which started in the 30s, not the 20s.
But they were figuring things out in the 20s.
But they hadn't risen to power yet.
He didn't say they rose to power. He said they figured it out in the 20s.
But the fascist party was not formed until after the Nazis had gained power.
But that's not what he said.
What I said was that they figured out it didn't work in the 20s. I didn't say
not all of them had figured out it didn't work in the 20s.
Well, clearly not all of them had, or otherwise the USSR wouldn't have formed. He never said anything about all of them figuring it out.
Most of them hadn't figured it out in the 20s. Most of them still haven't figured it out.
They still haven't figured it out. But when you think about it, the only difference between the Nazis, the Italian fascists, and the Soviets
is the language
was
they speak.
Soviets were globalists. Well, Well, that is that. But they were globalists. Well, the fascists and the Nazis were nationalists. But but that was the only difference in them.
That and the fascists believed in socialism through syndicalism, and the
True.
Nazis were fascism through direct government control. Well, yeah. Nazis were socialists through
Through
direct government
socialism,
control.
which essentially is communism, but communism tends towards globalist perspective, while they were nationalists.
See, what was it, Lenin, who said that socialism is just to only exist to implement communism?
Yes, he did say that.
The thing is, socialism is a lot older than communism. Because socialism dates back to Rousseau in the 1700s.
Dates back a lot farther than that.
Well, but
Just
Rousseau
wasn't given name until Rousseau.
Yeah.
Well, the first communist revolution was the French Revolution that I know
Yeah,
of.
but they were going
There may
off
have
of
been one
Rousseau's
before that.
teachings.
But we know that it had been tried in the American colonies before that. Failed.
Miserably.
But if you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat it. Now, one thing that has been shown is that for a communist nation to survive, it has to be constantly having an enemy. And therefore, it has to be constantly at war, either with its own people, or with a select group of people, or with foreign nations.
Which
But
if,
it's got to be
Or
in conflict.
if you follow post-apocalyptic books with a fictitious outside threat.
well, that does effectively make all national socialist movements globalist movements, because eventually they're just going to try to conquer all non-national entities and make them national.
Well, with the Italians, and their enemy was the landowners and the corporatists.
Interesting how
While
even after the
the
rise and
businessmen,
fall of socialism in Italy, or more specifically fascism in Italy, nothing's changed.
Yeah, we have a big fascism problem in the U.S., though not like Antifa things.
oh yeah, we have a fascist problem in the U.S. We just listen to our president, and the Great Pretender has come out and stated specifically that he's going to develop more union jobs. He didn't say anything about developing more jobs for everyone, just union jobs. That's fascism.
What if, and hear me out here, because this is going to be wild and completely fictitious. Not a chance it's going to happen. But what if these vaccines going around, right? It's genetic engineering, as we know. What if they're trying to build chimeras that are basically causing a union between several different people biologically, so therefore creating union jobs?
Oh, getting back into the realm of reality.
Wait a second. Actually,
Uh,
let's take it this way. You get one job, you merge it with another job, you've united the jobs. So in reality, he's making fewer jobs by making union jobs.
Basically, it's a means to pay back the mob who got him elected. Because as we know, organized crime runs the American Union.
Yeah. We also know that Biden was
And yet
pushing a bill to make right to work states illegal.
Yes.
yes. So with that being the case, we have to assume that he is trying to get the mob in control of all the businesses in the United States. And the only reason a politician would want organized crime to run everything would be is if they were responsible for getting him elected.
Or if they were part of organized crime.
Or if they're part of organized crime, yes.
Why not both?
I don't think he's smart enough for that.
¿Por qué no, ¿por qué no los dos?
But I don't think he's smart enough for that.
Well, speaking of organized crime,
to be both.
China's been doing some interesting stuff lately.
Yes, they have. Along the disputed zone with India, they're building houses and towns, claiming it's their Tibet.
There's a word for that, isn't there? Colonialism?
I mean, Taiwan was a colony at one point. They actually viewed it positively.
Yeah, but with how the left vilifies colonialism over here, you'd think they'd be up in arms about it. Then again, most of them haven't heard of it because the news sources belong to China now.
The only legitimate Chinese government is Taiwan. They're the only ones that are elected. They're the Republic of China.
Especially now that they took away Hong Kong's rights.
The People's Republic of China isn't legitimate. It's just a criminal state. Oh, your brother would love hearing me say this because after all, I'm putting a great big target on all of our chests. But
we've done that before. We'll do it again.
But when you think about it, okay, they're taking and building cities in Indian territory. Even the maps show that the area that they're building in is part of the country of India. They're taking and put in 800 ships off the coast of the Philippines and declared the waters Chinese. And they built an island nearby.
Well, okay, what is India going to do about it? There's been a lot of talk and no action so far. And it's been over a year.
That's just it. We don't know. We know that India is still in talks with Australia and the United States and Japan, but we don't know what they're going to do about it.
And the Filipino president has vocally come out and said that they can't do anything to stop China. And then proceeded to bash China later.
Well, just because they can't do anything to stop them doesn't mean they're not going to be vocal.
Well, he's now saying that with America's help, they'll drive them from Philippine waters.
Well, the U.S. Navy, if I recall correctly, does have a strong presence in the Philippines.
Yes, they do. And they have a very strong presence now in the South China Sea, too. But we know that the U.S. Navy has multiple carrier task force in the area. And they've got Japan and South Korea also that they can launch from. The U.S. has a strong presence in the area. China doesn't believe that is mad at Biden right now because Biden, instead of taking and doing what he said he was going to do and continue Obama's policies with China, he's been continuing Trump's policies with China.
Well, he doesn't have much of a choice. Public opinion is very strongly against China.
And
Only the minority of the absolute radicals on the socialist side support China.
Well, I mean, even most of the socialists view China as a failed socialist state.
Yeah, like I said, only the most radical of socialists and communists support China and the United States.
Yeah.
People like Matthew.
The thing about it is that Russia's a failed communist state, socialist state as well, but yet they still hasn't stopped them from trying to rebuild the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
Putin has stated that's his goal. That's why he's been pushing for war with the Ukraine.
It's also part of the reason why he just extended his own term limits by another 2 terms. So looks like at minimum Russia's going to get another 12 years of Putin.
But remember, according to Putin, and admittedly he is right, Russia does have the right to move their soldiers within their boundaries as they please. But he also has the right to receive any backlash for those troop movements that may be warranted.
Well, he is correct. And Biden has contacted the president of the Ukraine and told him that we would be supplying military assistance.
Did you know it's actually derogatory to call it the Ukraine? It's just Ukraine. Because the Ukraine harkens back to the USSR days, and I forget what Ukraine means, but yeah, for some reason adding the in front of it, they consider to be derogatory.
Are you sure they consider it to be derogatory?
No, I'm not 100% sure.
There are a lot of things that I've been told were derogatory to a certain group of people just to talk to that group of people and realize that was made up in their that was made up for them, usually by people who were offended in their stead.
I admit that I only know one person from Ukraine, and he always calls it Ukraine. He never calls it the Ukraine.
Well, Ukraine is technically the correct way to call it. But on the same note, we do call the United States as just that, the United States. So it is not that big of a stretch for us to call any other nation the insert name here, if appropriate.
Actually, we don't call it the Austria or the Spain or the Italy.
But we did call it the USSR, the Ukraine.
True.
Not to mention, we go a step farther when we're talking about their people, and we call them the British, the Australians, the Russians, the French, the Germans.
No. You got it wrong there. They're not the French, they're frogs.
And you know what Southerners do to frogs, right?
You know, that, I haven't heard that insult actually be used toward the French in a long time. In fact, it's outdated enough that I am pretty sure most of the French of our generation have never been called it before.
Probably not. but it fits well with the joke about the Southerners eating frogs.
Yeah.
And yet Brits still call Americans Yankees. And offend the entire southern portion of the U.S. How dare you call them Yankees? That's those Northerners.
Well, it's like when I was in Great Britain, they would take and ask me if I was a Yank. I'd tell them, no, no, I'm a Texan. And they said, oh, okay, you're a cowboy.
You ain't a Yankee or a cowboy.
It's amusing stereotypes work.
I mean, he did kind of dress to reinforce that stereotype at that time.
Yes, but he is also the exception, not the rule. The majority of people who live in Texas have never ridden a horse,
And have never worn a
let
Western style
alone
shirt.
broken a horse.
What do you mean? I was on a horse before I could walk.
I said you were the exception, not the rule. Just because the stereotype happened to fit you does not mean the stereotype is accurate.
Yes, but stereotypes are there for a reason.
They are there for a reason.
And when I was growing up, even people that never even touched a horse wore cowboy hats and boots.
And what was this about the Great Pretender?
It's part of the culture. It was beyond the cowboy. Of course, I grant you that the notion of the gun-toting Texan, most people don't realize that carrying a gun in Texas became illegal during Reconstruction.
I'm pretty sure it's legal again, isn't it?
Depends on how you carry it.
I mean, I know
Depends on how you
open carry is
and
legal.
what you're carrying.
In fact,
No, it's not.
I know in Texas you can open carry a sword. That law was passed a few years ago.
You can open carry a sword, yes. You can open carry a long gun. You cannot open carry a handgun unless it's a black powder handgun.
Interesting law.
Well, most states don't consider black powder weapons firearms.
But you can conceal carry while traveling.
And it's one of those intentionally ambiguous laws.
Mm-hmm.
Much like Arkansas's intentionally ambiguous law. Unlike Oklahoma, which is just, yeah, you can carry anything.
Oklahoma is a constitutional carry state. You can open carry, you can conceal carry. They don't care. And they recognize any state that allows constitutional carry. So if you're allowed to legally carry your firearm in your home state, you can legally carry the firearm in Oklahoma.
So
now the question becomes, how many people do?
I don't know. I probably a lot
According
of people.
According to a deputy sheriff I talked to here in this area, he stated that he believes that almost everybody is carrying.
I was specifically talking about open carry. Because I personally think open carry needs to become not only a law that's accepted, but the common culture again.
Most people conceal carry these days.
Well,
That's
I have in Arkansas, open carry was legal years ago while traveling.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't specify what traveling was. Now, concealed carry and open carry are both legal while traveling, but they don't say what traveling is. So as far as the state's concerned, you can legally carry either way.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to agree with you. I'd rather see people open carry than concealed carry.
There's a very big difference between an open threat of what will happen if you try something and just the fear that someone might possibly maybe.
Actually, you'd think the might possibly maybe would be a bigger deterrent.
From my experience, it's not. It's like if you hide the probabilities behind the lottery. People are more willing to do it than if you disclose the probability of them actually winning something. There's still those idiots who'll try it, but not as many.
More people were killed in the Wild West with axes and knives than with guns.
Doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
And more murders are committed every year with knives. Or, well, actually, more people are killed every year with a hammer than are killed with guns.
More people die every year to cows than they do by guns in the United States.
Well, depending on the cow, yeah, I could take and see how that's very probable.
There is a phrase that I ran across that I'm not entirely sure of the legitimacy of, but it goes along the lines of the probability is low, but it exists that somewhere, somehow, a cow is currently watching you.
Did you know that more people are killed in the eastern big cities than are killed in all the West?
Oh, especially now.
But even in the Wild West, it was true too.
Yeah.
Now, I grant you that there's some places that skew the numbers because, after all, you have L.A., San Francisco.
Chicago.
There's a lot of killings in L.A. and San Francisco.
Chicago.
Chicago is in the Midwest, but yeah. The Houston, of course, affects the numbers.
Yeah.
So does Dallas. And Missouri, St. Louis is a nightmare.
Missouri has the highest incarceration rate in the country.
How much of that is just because they enforce their laws, though?
I don't know how much of it is them enforcing their laws and how much is they have a really bad drug problem in Missouri. But they do have a really bad drug problem in Missouri.
Well, that's going to just get worse if they keep doing what the Democrats and the Libertarians want and legalizing marijuana. Because marijuana is a gateway drug. But they want to legalize it because they can tax 80% of the income off of it if it's legal.
Well, I'll admit, I don't really think it matters whether it's legalized or not.
I'm not actually saying that I see a problem with it because of the fact that it's just like alcohol.
Yeah.
People are going to use it and drive.
My argument is actually the same. It is just like alcohol and cigarettes. If people want it, they're going to get it regardless of the law.
Yeah, but not everything people want should be legal.
Didn't say it should be. I said it doesn't really matter whether it's legalized or not, because it won't really change anything.
I'm going to quote a libertarian friend of mine. He stated, if you look at the 1800s, no prescription drug at the time was controlled. So if you wanted to go into the pharmacy and buy something, you could just go in and buy it.
Yeah, but they had so many opium addicts.
Yes, they did. They had a tremendous amount of opium addicts.
Addiction
His
toppled
argument.
the country.
Well, we have a tremendous amount of opioid addicts today. It hasn't changed. It's just the method they get it
His
is
argument
different.
was that the cost of prescription drugs was cheap because it didn't have the heavy regulation. Now he's got a valid point in that area, because if you could legally go down and buy penicillin or whatever other kind of antibiotic and not have to have a prescription to do it, the costs of doctors is going to go down because people are going to start self-treating.
Which has problems, but not nearly as much as people going bankrupt for a rotten tooth.
And then turning to drugs.
Yeah.
And then turning to drugs because of the pain. Now, I grant you, when it comes to pain pills, addiction is a serious problem. And they're not going to solve addiction by taking and going through and outlawing it. They're just going to make people criminals.
Yeah. Especially for those who withdrawal will literally kill them. And for the stronger painkillers, that's exactly what withdrawal will do.
Well,
go on.
I remember, I think it was after the Netherlands went through and just legalized all drugs. They actually had to backtrack when it came to heroin, because people were just shooting up in parks, and it was causing a lot of safety issues.
Well, see, they run into that problem in California right now. Heroin addicts are shooting up in parks.
Yeah, but they were doing that anyway.
The majority of homeless in California are drug addicts, and they get their drugs not from dealers, but from the state. Methadone clinic.
Or sometimes both.
And sometimes both, yeah. That's now we find that since the legalization of marijuana, crime rates gone through the roof.
Because marijuana makes you paranoid.
Well, it does that, but it also costs a lot of money, even the legal stuff. So they have to take and feed their habit some way.
The point, see, the issue with your argument, Josh, is yes, it won't stop people from using it, but it'll deter people from ever starting in the first place.
I think you misunderstood my argument, though. My argument was not, hey, we should legalize all drugs. My argument was that it really doesn't matter. It's not going to change much.
But clearly it will change much, because it is still acting as a deterrent.
Not necessarily. Think about alcohol. We tried this before. What happened when they outlawed alcohol?
Yeah, but alcohol was already commonly accepted.
Consumption rates skyrocketed.
Your granddad took and started making his own?
Yeah.
Your great-granddad? Well, your great-great-granddad.
But it
and
was,
your great uncle started running shine.
if you forget, Robert, it was a public opinion that voted to have alcohol outlawed. It was the majority.
Well,
And
actually, they did it via convention, so
in what, less than 10 years, the majority had flipped in the opposite direction?
well, the majority was never in favor. But it was
Well,
an amendment that it wasn't an amendment done by the people. There are multiple ways to get a constitutional amendment passed. This was not the one done by the majority, by the vote of the people.
I thought it was done by a constitutional convention.
I'm pretty sure it was, which means that the politicians wanted it. Under
Politicians
pressure
did want it,
by under
but
the
they
pressure of the
were
temperance
heavily
movement, which was
lobbied by the popular group at the time, which
it
was
was
a
by
group of Puritans, believe it or not.
they were pushed by the temperance movement. The temperance movement was never a popular movement. They were a vocal movement. They weren't a popular movement.
Fair enough. Those are easy to mistake sometimes.
Kind of like the homosexual activists or the feminist activists. They're never been a majority, but they're very vocal, and they get their way with the politicians.
Yeah.
Now, I'll admit that the Temperance League was at least right in their goals, unlike these other activists that want to destroy everything that has any semblance of good and right. They were actually trying to take and do away with an evil in their society, and that was drunkenness.
Yeah.
You'll remember that back then the progressive movement actually, at least somewhat, believed they were pushing toward progress.
But the solution to drugs and alcohol and cigarettes is not laws. It's getting people saved. That's the only solution there is.
Agreed.
The laws aren't going to change much, whether they stand in one way or the other.
Well, if you look at it, it's kind of like these gun laws. Who's going to obey a gun law? Law-abiding citizens. People who are going to break it are going to break it. If it's when it comes down to any law, it's that way. So legislating morality doesn't work.
And yet you have to legislate morality to a certain degree.
But we have to legislate it to a certain degree to punish those that
So
go
the
too
question
far.
is, where do you draw the line? That's always the big question. Because you can't have people murdering each other, yet you still that's a moral issue, and you still have to legislate it. You still have to punish them for doing that evil.
Well, the line becomes at victimless crimes.
But what's a victimless crime?
One that only affects the person doing it.
Okay, somebody lights up a joint, starts smoking it, breathes the smoke into your face.
Then,
is that a victimless?
Well, that's technically harassment. That's not a victimless crime.
Okay, let's just say you're in the room and you smell the vapors and you get high.
Well, in case you forgot, that is already regulated, for one thing, because smoking in public is considered a felony.
Smoking
or misdemeanor.
No, misdemeanor.
Yeah, misdemeanor. It's already regulated, and marijuana would make no difference. Can't really be enforced.
They don't enforce it. If you look like at the drug and alcohol, the DUI laws, if you are under any kind of a mind-altering drug, whether it be
or substance
marijuana,
in general,
prescription drugs, in substance in general, alcohol, anything that alters the mind, you could be arrested for DUI. because you're a danger to other people. They keep trying to say, well, if you take that marijuana won't affect your brain, it doesn't actually make you dangerous. It doesn't do anything.
A lot of
The
those people
people
have
who
already
say
fried
that
their
are
brains,
either morons or they're lying,
or they've already fried
or
their brains.
both.
Yes, because the simple fact is that if it didn't do anything, people wouldn't take it.
And
It's that simple.
I know more than enough people whose brain chemistry has been permanently altered by marijuana. They act different, they think different, they behave different, and their entire outlook on life and how to function as a human being changes.
I walked up on an individual not too long ago that had that was sitting in the middle of the road, blocking traffic. And when I walked up to his window, he stated he was waiting for his girlfriend. And I looked over, and he had a gym bag sitting next to him, full of marijuana products. After talking to him for a matter of just minutes, I can tell you this man was not playing with a full deck. He honestly thought that because he had a prescription card, that possessing that much marijuana was totally okay. He had more than enough to send him to prison for possession and distribution.
It's probably
And
exactly
you
what
could
he was
tell
doing,
he
was
was
distributing.
not. You could tell he was not taking and thinking clearly because his speech was not logical. It took a while for anything to penetrate when he was told something. It took a bit for it to manage to get in. And he was clearly not operating in a sober, rational fashion. And we're not talking the light 'em up joints. We're talking like the pills and the gummies and that sort of thing. It alters the brain chemistry. It kills brain cells. Some forms of marijuana I have found out being told about recently. They take and wind a person up, and others bring them down. I don't understand the difference in the two types of marijuana. I have no interest in it, to be honest with you. But that means it acts as an upper in one case and a downer in another. With that being the case, you can take and drive a person to commit suicide or make them think that it's 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
Now, there are some chemicals within the substance that have beneficial effects, namely for cerebral palsy. But you can isolate that chemical,
And they have isolated
and they
that
have isolated that chemical, and you don't need to get high to get the beneficial effect.
Well, most people who support medical marijuana really just want an excuse to get high.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Yeah, but most of them aren't aware because they're
And all three of us here are
Well,
anti-drug. We just have
mhm.
subtle disagreements on the way that the government should handle it.
I'm not sure the government can handle it.
I'm
That's
not sure
my
the government
stance.
can handle it either, but that doesn't mean I think
I
that there should
don't believe the government can handle it, and I don't think they should try. I think it's a waste of taxpayer money. Just even the attempt.
Now, I tend to take and think that if they're going to legalize it for medical use, it should be sold in pharmacies and regulated just like any other drug.
Yeah, they don't give you cocaine for
If
painkillers.
Anymore.
Yeah,
Well, they still do give modified
Anymore, yes.
cocaine, but you can't just go out and buy the leaves because you're having a little pain.
and it's like you can't. Yeah, you have a toothache. They're not going to take and say, "Oh, here's you a quarter ounce of cocaine." No, you're going to get some benzocaine or novocaine.
Or lidocaine, or any of those other canes.
But it's still It's still a processed drug for a specific purpose. It's all cocaine. Well, a derivative of cocaine. It's like if you go in with a bacterial infection and you have all kinds of different things that are psyllins. They very rarely give you a shot of penicillin anymore.
Penicillin, amoxicillin.
All right, take this powder. Don't worry, it is a fungus,
Motrin.
but I want you to drink it.
That's we used to buy it in Mexico that way.
Just straight penicillin.
Yeah. You see, in Mexico, you don't have to have a doctor's prescription for antibiotics. So you can go into the pharmacies in Mexico and buy penicillin just straight over the counter. Same was true with some painkillers too.
Now, thinking about it, it's amazing how many people seem to think Germ-X will have any effect on COVID.
Remember,
It's an antibacterial. It is not an antiviral. It doesn't affect viruses in the slightest.
Well, alcohol is a natural disinfectant.
It is a natural disinfectant. That's why it's an antibacterial. But viruses have a coating over them, a protein coating that protects them from said antibacterials. You need antivirals to kill them.
If that is going to stop anybody from getting a virus. An airborne virus will go in through the eyes, too.
Any of the mucous membranes. Eyes, ears, nose, mouth.
Head,
More delicate parts.
It's they were saying, well, you've got then you get definite protection by wearing a mask. If you can breathe through it, the virus can get through it.
You know what would give you definite protection, though? An EVA suit.
Yes. Agreed. An EVA suit would work. But who can afford those?
Astronauts.
No, they have the government pay for it.
They do have the government pay for it. But do you know how much astronauts get paid?
A lot.
It's a lot.
A lot. Of course, some astronauts now are working for Musk.
Yeah. I mean, the other option is to go for scuba dry suits.
Paid in Cologne? You said they were working for Musk. It's one of the most common cologne scents.
You know,
Elon Musk.
I saw a picture the other day that showed this guy. I don't remember the guy's name. He was some sort of startup inventor somewhere out in Africa. And I don't even remember what he created. It wasn't that impressive. But the caption of it said, "This guy is the Elon Musk of Africa." Now, for those of you who don't realize, Elon Musk is South African. So Elon Musk is the African Elon Musk.
Elon Musk is Elon Musk.
That's true. But could he have taken and done what he's done if he had stayed in Africa?
No, it really couldn't.
I never liked those kind of stories. Where
He
it's
also
like
couldn't afford his hair
could've-
implants if he did that.
He never could have done what he'd done if he'd stayed X place, and it's probably true. But how are you going to make it to where that place can do those sorts of things?
Okay, the only way that you can make Africa be able to take and do what is done here in the United States is you have to take and get rid of their current political systems and basically remake the United States over in Africa.
Well,
And then give it a few years to, for lack of a better term, ferment.
Because to take and have economic and technological success, you have to have a certain degree of freedom. And the culture over there has very corrupt governments. And they're not going to allow anyone to have that kind of success unless they're giving kickbacks to the government.
You need freedom and motivation. And freedom only comes in one way. Motivation, you got a couple of different options. The easiest one that we use is money.
Yeah.
The second most common is war.
There's several different motivations.
That is less
Oh,
common
I
than
said there were
fear.
several, but I said the easiest one that we use in the United States is money.
Actually, we use war probably more often.
No, not to develop. If you spent much time talking to people in the military, you would find that they are not cutting edge of technology. War is not used as an excuse to develop.
But they do develop a lot of cutting edge technology. They just don't give it out to the military.
DARPA is constantly designing cutting edge technology for the military, but Congress stops it from getting to the military most of the time because it costs.
Well, if you like today's episode,
I got some.
Remember that it was completely free. It cost you nothing to watch this.
Wrong. It cost them time, and time is money.
And if you liked the content that we gave you and didn't charge you for, feel free to hit the like button. If you disliked it, then that's okay too. Feel free to hit the dislike button and share it with your enemies. You don't have to share it with your friends. Those who liked it can do that. Feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section below, and see you next time.
Bye.